Hey hip hop lovers, I'm here to talk to you today about a cool piece of hip hop history. Um, right here, record from 1979 on Golden Flamingo Records, Gangster Rock. This shows you just how far back the reference of gangster hip hop goes, although this is definitely not a gangster rap record, by Lil Starski, 1979. Now, if the name Lil Starski strikes a chord, that's because this is actually the artist known as Lovebug Starski. The legendary MC from the Disco Fever, really old school veteran, did important records like Positive Life in 1981, the theme music to Rappin', that kind of awful movie with Mario Van Peebles, but his music to it was important. It was just important that it was an early hip hop movie, period, that existed. And stuff like, Amityville, the kind of really early horrorcore, back when it was more of a novelty joke, Monster Mash kind of deal. Before he was Lovebug Starski, he was Little Starski, and he put out this record, Gangster Rock, all the way back in 1979. And he followed that up on the same label with Dancing Party People in 1981, and after that, that's when he switched his name over. If you look up his bio on sites like Wikipedia or whatever, I'm pretty sure they all say, Lovebug Starski put out his first record in 1981, Positive Life, but really, that's only his first record under the name Lovebug Starski. As Little Starski, this is his first record. Now, it's important to note that there are multiple versions of this 12-inch. They all came out in 1979, they all came out on Golden Flamingo. But the reason why there's multiple versions is just because there were mistakes. For example, there's this version right here by Gangster Rock Lil Starski, side A instrumental, side B instrumental. That's right, they did the whole thing, and this is not like incorrectly labeled. The record represents that. It's just the instrumental on both sides of the record. There's also a similar version which came out with just vocals on both sides. So side A is vocal, side B is vocal, and then finally they came out with the corrected version, again right away in 1979, which has the vocal on one side and the instrumental on the other, the proper one. And there are other ways to tell them apart. The catalog numbers are different. Some versions will say instead of Lil Starski, they'll say the Land of Hits Orchestra. Land of Hits was sort of the label that distributed Golden Flamingo, so it's just, the label orchestra. Because remember, 1979, this is disco hip-hop, was all done with live band. So the instrumental was just credited to the orchestra, and the vocal version was just credited to the MC. So on the purely instrumental version, even though it's the instrumental, it still says Lil Starski on both sides. And the purely vocal one actually says Land of Hits Orchestra on both sides, even though they're both vocals. So again, only this one really gets it correct in that regard as well. So obviously this is the version to own, although actually all three are usually pretty rare, collectible, and go for high prices. Certainly the version with vocal versions on both sides is probably close enough for a lot of heads who aren't too, big on instrumental tracks. And even the purely instrumental one usually goes for a lot of money. It's a little harder to find. Not as hard as the other ones, but it's definitely, because it's a misprint, because it's a rare mistake, and, it's definitely a collector's item. But if you're just getting it for the music, you just want to have the dope record, this is the one you want. So how is it musically? It's pretty good. It's pretty solid. It's not his best. It definitely comes off as kind of raw and unrefined. It's definitely his rapping. He's high energy, but his voice doesn't sound quite as natural as it does in later records. Lyrically, he's definitely just kind of spitting out a lot of sort of almost random stuff, when he kind of does the ba-da-da-ba, dang-da-dang, diddy kind of stuff. Lots of stuff you've heard before, although, of course, it's 1979. But, I mean, he's doing that just like Busy Bee did. Of course, Busy Bee was known as Busy Bee Starski back in the days, and there's, that whole connection. And he does a verse, which is actually pretty interesting. He does a little verse about Superman, hit him in the head with some kryptonite, which is the same verse exactly that Lady B does on her record, which is also 1979, to the Beach All. So they both came out in 79, they both came out to the same verse. Now, there's plenty of old school records, with raps about Superman. I mean, that was just a thing. Obviously, I'm sure almost everybody knows the Rapper's Delight stuff, when Big Bang Hank raps about it, and Dayton Lois Lane, and of course Nucleus jam on it. They battle Superman to the death on the microphone. But only this song and Lady B actually feature the exact same rhymes about hitting him on the head with kryptonite, and now he's busting out Lois Lane. But again, it's really not so much. I mean, I definitely wouldn't say he bit this from Lady B. If anything, I would say she probably heard it on a Lil Starski record, because she was a radio DJ, and that's how she got into hip-hop, and that's how she put out her record. But probably neither one is really biting. These are just really old-school staple rhymes, which is fine, which is good, and it's, again, it's high energy, it's live music, it's definitely a fun record, just not as best, not the strongest. So it's a long song, but not epically long like some of the more infamous disco rap records like Rapper's Delight or The Adventures of Super Rhymes, where they go on for like 15, 16 minutes. It's just just a very sort of stretched out, free-form song like they all were back then. This is very, you know, no real clear-cut chorus, no particular subject matter, just rhymes for the sake of it. It's produced by a guy named Peter Brown, but remember, in these days, this is probably doesn't necessarily mean produced by isn't code for responsible for the music like it is in hip hop now. You know, if you say produced by Dr. Dre, that means he made the beat, he made the instrumental. This is more the classical definition of produced by, which means he probably just paid for the studio time, got the artists and the band together and all that kind of stuff and put the record together. In that sense, he's responsible for producing the project. So, of course, I'm going to play some clips of it right now. I just think it's really cool. I mean, A, it's a pretty good record, but B, well, just about everybody, you know, who knows their hip-hop knows Lovebug Starski. He's certainly a veteran who's, you know, in the genre since day one, and who stayed in. I mean, he was actually a member of the Veterans, after all, in the 90s, and did stuff with, you know, Dougie Fresh and all sorts of kind of comeback records later on. So he's always been in there. He's really a core, you know, if you know your hip-hop, you gotta know Lovebug Starski, but not necessarily everybody knows Little Starski. So this is his first record, Gangsta Rock.
Don't stop till you get on the mountain top. What you be the time, it won't be as long.